Good evening. Been a long time since I came out to the Ridgeway. Missed it. So this is one of those ones that, like so many of the ones I see at Ridgeway, kind of had to look for. You know, that sucks. Had to look it up to figure out what was going on because I hadn't heard of this movie. Hadn't heard it was coming out. Hadn't heard anybody in it. It was like, hi, here's this Churchill film. It's like, oh, it's a documentary, you know. So when I researched it a little bit, looked at the cast, which is phenomenal, I was like, all right, we gotta check that one out. It's this long silence here, just because I'm trying to kind of gather my thoughts, put into words what I want to say about this one, because it's not a bad film, but I don't think it's the stand up and cheer type of picture that I think they wanted it to be. I think it's a little slow, and I don't know. It doesn't leave the best taste in the mouth. And again, not because it's a bad film, because everything about it is really quite wonderful. The acting is, superb because it's British actors, and it's older British actors. You got Brian Cox, who, most younger people, I don't even know if younger people now, I'm thinking younger people in terms of my generation, but my generation hasn't been young for a good 10, 15 years, But, I first knew of Brian Cox as Colonel Stryker in X2, of course, member of the Royal Shakespeare Company with Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, and all them. So very, very well-versed actor. Does a really great job of playing Winston Churchill. Problem with playing someone like Winston Churchill, and I mentioned this when I did the Jackie review with Natalie Portman, is that what I find happens a lot now with biopics is that, back in the old days, they never worried about, when they did a biopic, if the person looked or sounded anything like the actual person. It's like, hi, you're playing Joe DiMaggio. It's like, well, I don't look like Joe DiMaggio. We don't know how Joe DiMaggio sounds. So it's all right. So don't feel like you got to put on some kind of character. Just go out there and act. And people assume that's what Joe DiMaggio acted like. But now the ideas of acting and realism and all that have changed. So now when there's a biopic, now they always feel like everybody has to become the character. And like I mentioned with Natalie Portman there, sometimes doing that, like doing an accent or doing a dialect or anything like that, especially for someone like Winston Churchill, who had a very, very specific way of speaking, it can really, really quickly turn into caricature and not playing a character. They're just doing the voice. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the, that kind of thing. And he doesn't do that. That's something I felt. I'm gonna badmouth a movie I really love and an actor I really love right now. That's one of the weaknesses I felt with Timothy Spall playing the character in The King's Speech, is I felt like he was playing the accent a little too much, playing the dialect a little too much, and it came off very phony. Brian Cox doesn't do that. It feels much more natural. There's only a couple times where it feels like he's really putting it on, and ironically those are in moments where he's giving a big speech, where you would in real life, you'd put on kind of your best face and make the words sound very important, so it fits there. So he's really great. Also in this film, Miranda Richardson, who it's lovely to see her in a film again. I really like Miranda Richardson. For those who don't know Miranda Richardson, Miranda Richardson is another British actor, and she's mostly known for her comedy. The thing I first knew her on was playing Queen Elizabeth in The Black Adder, way back in the day. Most modern audiences, again, probably know her as Rita Skeeter in the Harry Potter films, and haven't seen her in a long time. I don't know if she's just doing stage stuff, or doing mostly British films or whatever, but and it's really nice to see her, and really nice to see her do her serious acting and not just her comedy, because she's really funny. But she's one of these actors that she can be really funny, but when she's serious, she is like really deathly serious, almost to a scary point. But I think she did a really nice job. I liked her a lot, and the two of them balanced each other really well. So the one thing you can always depend on one of these movies for is some brilliant acting. So if you're a young actor and you want to see some really, really great acting, really see a kind of a textbook on how to do this, go watch a film like this. This film, the acting is superb. There's only one exception to that, actually. The only person who I didn't like was I did not like the guy playing Bertie, King George, again of King's Speech fame. And in a way, you gotta feel sorry for all those actors who are playing that guy, because I think that's one of those roles now, whether you can debate how real it was to real life. Queen Elizabeth certainly says it was real, but I think Colin Firth has kind of become to that role what Christopher Reeves is to Superman, what Adam West is to Batman, what Hugh Jackman is to Wolverine, and what Tobey Maguire is to Spider-Man. They are the one you have to live up to, So, I mean, nobody's going to do as good a job as him, and anytime that character shows up in one of these movies, you're like, well, you're not Colin Firth, And the actor does an okay-ish job. He has a really good speech in it. Ironic, the King has a really good speech, but Chang. It's a really, very good speech. But the problem I had with him, and this is a weird thing, is that the way he talked, and maybe it was because he was trying to do the whole trying not to stutter thing, but his accent he sounded French at some points, and then he sounded like he was speaking with a Spanish accent, and then he sounded like he'd have a British accent every so often. And so it's like, I don't know, the guy, he just wasn't very good. He just really wasn't very good, even though he had a really good speech, and he delivered it fine. He did a fine job with the speech he gives Churchill, but he wasn't that great. But all the acting is fairly good. The story is interesting too. I usually talk about the story first, and I didn't this time. So this film is kind of Winston Churchill's point of view in like the 3 to 4 days leading up to D-Day, and his objection to the plan, his attempts to stop it, his attempts to kind of go along, his attempts to do everything, to kind of make the situation better, at least from what he sees, and the opposition he runs into from like the armed forces, the king, everybody's kind of telling him, hey, we got this, dude. You need to kind of chill out and let us take care of it. So it's an interesting point of view and an interesting stance to take, especially when you're. What I liked about this movie is that it really does kind of strip away the grandeur of this great historical figure, but not in any like mean-spirited way. A lot of biopics now, I feel, are just trying to kind of cut down the person that you once loved, and go, oh, but look what a jerk they are. The line I'm reminded of the most as I was watching this was a line from the play 1776, right at the end when they're trying to convince everybody to sign the Declaration of Independence, and Ben Franklin says to John Adams says to Ben Franklin, if we give in on this issue, prosperity will never forgive us. And Franklin says to him, that's probably true, but we're not going to hear a thing. We're going to be long gone. And besides, what is history going to think we were? Demigods? We were men, no more, no less, trying to achieve a job against greater odds than a more generous God would have allowed. And I really feel that's the stance this film was taking, is that what it was trying to show you was that, these are all people that a lot of us, we've grown up hearing about. They've become legend. Eisenhower and Churchill and all that. And the thing you got to remember is that they were just people. They were just people doing the best they could and making the best decisions that they could at the time with the information they had and the backgrounds they had. They weren't perfect. They weren't, they weren't infallible. And that doesn't make them bad people. It just means they had a lot going on. And I think this film does a really nice job of kind of showcasing the toll that takes. They hint at, and I don't know, I'm not a Churchill historian. This would be a question for my mom, who's a history major, and it'll be interesting if she watches this movie to kind of get her opinion on it. But they really hint at the fact, through kind of descriptions and things that he does, that Churchill battled with clinical depression. Just in some of the things he says and some of his responses to things and things that people say about him, about how he handles certain situations, it really did sound like they were trying to kind of get across to you that, all this shit, and I'm sorry to use the language again, but I mean, that's a lot of shit to pile on one person, especially when you consider, and they really go into it in this one, that he was in the First World War. So there is just a ton of guilt, a ton of crap this guy has seen, and that it takes an emotional and a physical toll. And I think the film does a fairly good job of taking the story from that point of view. So it sounds like I'm really praising this film and like it's this great, masterpiece. And it's a goodish film. I think it's well made, but I think it just didn't land for me. It just didn't stick the landing. I think a lot of that can be in terms of pacing. Again, British film, so it's a very slow film, but even more so, I mean, it's only an hour and a half, and it felt longer than that, because the director takes these long pauses, especially in the early parts of the film. There are long moments of Churchill just sitting and driving and looking contemplative, and some really gorgeous shots of him like walking along the beach, or like framed in these really wonderful windows that they have there. So some great shots, but there's these long shots in between, dialogue moments, and like, so when dialogue happens, it's almost like that, they're talking again. And I felt like that really killed the pace and the momentum of it. I feel like there's a time, I'm a big proponent, anybody who's been directed by me can tell you, I'm a big proponent of the silent moment. I think those are important. They help sell important moments. But that's the thing. I think you need to pick and choose where they're going to happen. If you're doing them all the time, kind of goes back to my criticism of Wonder Woman, in that, the director's love of the jumping up in slow motion and showing in bullet time the person spinning around, and it's like, if you do it all the time, it takes away from the impact. You need to pick your moments to do something like that, and I think that's true here too. I think the director needed to pick their moment of, when we needed those slow, those quiet, contemplative moments, and when we needed to just kind of keep the story and the character going, because it for a long time you just couldn't connect with anything. I think that's the biggest fault of it, is I think the pacing just kills it, because it's very hard for you to get invested in it when there's just so much dead space. I really don't know what else to say about this one, so I don't think I'm going to try to drag this out any longer than really needs to be, because I don't think there's much to say. I think it's a very well acted, a lovely directed film. I'm not trying to say the director is a hack or anything like that, because I think there's some really beautiful shots. And one thing I love about going and seeing movies like this, especially ones like this, is that it's so refreshing to see a movie where you're pretty confident that everything in it is actually there. You know, there's no shots of this where you're like, oh, that's obviously in front of a green screen. You know, it's like, no, you can tell they actually went to the place and actually got these shots. I mean, there's a grounded nature to it as opposed to everything being so flat. Pardon me. But yeah, I think if you're a history buff, you know, like my mom or, you know, like my buddy Dawson there, shout out to Dawson Cook. If you're a history buff, I think you're gonna like this movie. I think it's a movie for history buffs. If not, I think you can still get something out of it. But I believe that it doesn't. This film is kind of in that, you know, the World War II movie, kind of like The King's Speech. You know, the film suffers from a lot of King's Speech envy, and it doesn't quite reach the, you know, I don't want to say the pinnacle, but it doesn't quite hit what that film hit. Not a bad film by any stretch of the imagination, but, you know, if you miss this one, I don't think you're going to miss too much. So that's all for me on this one. Yeah, make your choice. Go see it. Don't go see it. I don't think it's going to, you know. But I hope everyone has a good week. And until next time, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.